freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 228 of Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by azfirearms.com, your nationwide hometown gun shop. I am one of your hosts, Cheryl Todd.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd. The theme today is The War on Reason, and our guest is Todd Fossey.
Todd is the founder and chief instructor at Integrative Defense Strategies, IDS, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Todd is an FSI certified force science analyst and a former lecturer at medical schools. He has a 15-year background in psychophysiology, offering his special insight into the psychological, physiological, and perceptual effects of high-stress critical incidents and human performance. And I cannot wait for this conversation. Welcome to the show, Todd.
Oh man, I'm so excited to be here. You know, for the audience, Cheryl and I met last November in Washington, D.C. at the 2A rally. It was such an honor to be a speaker along with Cheryl on the West Lawn. It was a magical day, wasn't it? And Cheryl was just one of those people that I just gravitated to right away. I think I know why. I think it was the Holy Spirit that was bringing us together for a cause greater than ourselves. So we started talking about the possibility of coming on the podcast back then in November, and it just now worked out where our schedules allowed for this to happen. So super honored to be here and be a part of this conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, Todd, it definitely was the Holy Spirit, but also the fact that Cheryl understands all these big words that we're saying. I mean, I couldn't do it. There's too many in there.
That's so funny. Well, my, we own a gun shop. We own an auction house. We have this Gun Freedom Radio podcast style show now. But my degrees are in psychology, and so really that's like my candy is thinking about thinking, right? So
and I'm her experiment.
And I had the great opportunity to meet your daughter and granddaughter as well.
Yes, at the SHOT Show in January. And thankfully, the rally in DC and the SHOT Show in January in Vegas, those happened before all this COVID craziness, because who knows, so many opportunities that we might have had to meet up again have been postponed and canceled. And so, and I got to meet your just absolutely beautiful inside and outside wife, just beautiful human being. So
thank you.
Absolutely.
She had great things to say about you as well.
Oh, I love it. If we lived closer, we would be hanging out, I guarantee you.
Definitely. Well, my father and my extended family all lives down in the Phoenix area. And we go there to visit. So the next time I'm in town, I'm going to let you guys know, and I'll come by at the shop and say hello.
Oh, please do. That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So before we dive into the importance of how and why you train you do, let's talk about a video that you posted up recently about the silent weapons of psychological warfare and gaslighting, this war on reason and free will and critical thinking that is happening. It's not a perception. It is actually happening. And that's why we themed today's show, The War on Reason.
I want to let the audience know that I'm actually trained in these techniques.
Okay, so you can use them on us. So.
Well, I was trained in these techniques in formal mass communication. I'm actually a trained propagandist. Mm-hmm. And And when I was being forced, I lived in LA for 10 years, and this is what I did in LA for 10 years. I was a writer, director, producer in LA for 10 years. And I was being groomed and I was being forced to use my skills to push this agenda. And the farther I got in that industry, in that system, the more I wanted out, right? And so I decided I was going to use that education and that knowledge against the system, to expose it and to point it out for the greater good of truth, right? Because the truth will set you free, right?
Amen.
So, right. And so I want to let the audience know that I'm not coming at this from a lay perspective. I'm not coming at this from an amateur perspective. I'm coming at this from the perspective of a professional when it comes to psychology, mass communication, but also as a human being who experiences this on a daily basis. What I started to see through social media was a lot of commentary and confusion from conservatives who were pointing out the incongruencies, the inconsistencies, were pointing out the hypocrisy, right? Pointing out the duplicity of the leftist narrative. And I still continue to see it today. It's just constant. It's everywhere. And so I wanted to put out a video that sort of helped shine a light on what they were experiencing. And to give them an idea for what the early stages are for how they can combat this psychological warfare that they are experiencing. What I see is, people commenting about that because they're experiencing this frustration and what's known as cognitive dissonance, right? Cognitive dissonance is when you're experiencing two contradictory ideas simultaneously in your mind. And what starts to happen is we start to get frustrated and angry and emotional, which makes us easily manipulated. And the other common response is that we become docile. We don't do anything. So to give an example of that would be like Pavlov's dogs, right? It's a part of the conditioning. It's called classical conditioning or operant conditioning. You're being conditioned to a specific stimuli or set of stimuli. That's what's happening. And when we can understand that, we can see through that. It helps to mitigate that manipulation. So what happened is if we use the example of Pavlov's dogs, the bell would be there, right? Whenever the food Pavlov would put food out, they would ring a bell. Pavlov would put food out for a dog, and then they would ring a bell simultaneously. Then after a while, there would no longer be food, and he would just ring the bell, but the dogs would still salivate. There's no rational reason for the dog to salivate if there's no food there. They've just been conditioned to respond to a specific stimuli. That's what they're doing to us. So now they ring all kinds of different bells simultaneously at the same time. What happened with Pavlov's dogs would be they would get confused and their tail would go between their legs and they would become submissive and they would go lay down in the corner because they didn't know what to do. And that's exactly what's happening on in the mass communication that we're being exposed to today. So I wanted to point that out so that people understood what's happening is that you're being exposed to this type of manipulation in a form of what's called mass gaslighting. So gaslighting is a form of narcissistic abuse, something that narcissists do to the people in their lives, where no matter what happens, those people in the narcissist's lives are never right. They're always wrong. It's a form of manipulation to get that person to question their own sanity. So if you think about that from the conservative perspective right now, no matter what we do, no matter what position we take, no matter how rational, reasonable, no matter how much evidence we have, we're always going to be wrong. So I wanted to point out that is the point. The point is that you will always be wrong. Right? No matter what you do, no matter what you do, you will always be on the wrong side of this message. And so by understanding this is mass gaslighting, now we can look at this from an objective point of view. For example, when I had my private practice, if I had a patient come into me and they were explaining what was happening in their life, right? And I would say, oh, you should know you're being gaslit by a narcissist. And I would point it out. And then they would say, oh, that is it, isn't? So now they were empowered to see past it. And I would say, now what's important is that you don't dance on that dance floor. And that you create your own narrative and you don't let that person create your narrative for you. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
So we now what has to happen? What has to happen is that conservatives and rational people need to understand that Western civilization was created on the foundation of reason, evidence, and objectivism, an objective point of view. So in order for this neo-Marxist agenda to take root, they have to first eliminate the ethos and the values of objectivism, right? So if we can have an understanding of what that psychological operation is, now we don't have to dance on that dance floor anymore, and we can start to create our own narrative. That's what I want to say to rational or conservative people, is like, stop reacting to it. That's what they want. That's what narcissists want. They want you to react to the stimuli, the bell that they're ringing. Stop reacting to it. And now through social media, start putting out your own narrative. Create your own narrative that is rational, that says, oh, look, instead of saying, oh, look at all how screwed our country is, saying, no, 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 no. We are the silent majority. Now we own this playing field. We own the dance floor, and we're going to take it back. They're welcome to feel how they want to feel. That's okay. That's not a problem for us. But the moment that it starts to become imposed onto us, now we've got a problem. And now it's time for us to create firm boundaries that are appropriate for the stimuli that's being forced onto us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of like
100%.
let the narcissists know that some of us don't have a tail to stuck between our legs, right?
That's right. And then eventually what will happen is they'll just end up consuming themselves.
Yes,
Right.
They'll have to turn on somebody, and it'll be themselves. That is so true. And when you were talking about that, there's no right way to do something. It does create that docile mode. And the phrase for it, if I'm not incorrect, is learned helplessness.
That's right.
We just learn that there's no right, so we don't want to choose anything, and we just freeze.
Right.
And then it allows the other side to just define us, to paint us however they want to. And you are so right that in a non-inflamed, non-emotional way, we need to continue to just be who we are and say truth, speak truth to each other.
You kind of have a president they're doing that to right now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Love him or don't love him. You've got to have a little bit of compassion for the fact that he can't breathe correctly for the other side. So
no, but I think what's important that people know, this is social engineering.
Yeah.
That's what it is. This is social engineering. And so it's happening on purpose.
It certainly is. And I wanted to ask you, since we're calling it the war on reason, would you say, how do you see it? Is it a Cold War or is it a hot war? Because the riots across the nation seem like it's taken it hot instead of just being sort of this cold stalemate of ideas.
Yeah, I would call it a warm war.
A warm, yes.
A warm war.
It's on a low
it's not
boil.
Cold. It's not. Yeah, it's not cold, and it's not quite hot yet. But having been a student of history and knowing this isn't a new playbook, right? I know that all of these radicals on the left think that they're being so clever and cute and original. No. This postmodernist point of view and objective goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, just so you know. You aren't that clever and you aren't that cute, right? And you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool everybody all the time, right?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. And this is an old playbook. And just if there's anybody on that side who's listening to this, you should know what happens to the people that are a part of this movement, right? You should know what happened to the brown shirts. You should know what happened to them as soon as that power took root. You are the people who will be taken out first, just so you know, by your own, just so you know. I know you think you have all this all figured out, but just do a little research on history and how this playbook has played out all throughout the human history. Just so you know that. So I digress a little bit. But what was the question again, Cheryl? I'm sorry.
Was it a Cold War or a hot war?
Oh yeah, it's a warm war. I think that what's going to happen is what the left wants to happen anyways. They want to continue to push us until we have the conservatives who are slow to anger have some type of a kinetic response where we have no choice. And then that way they in the media can spin it into them having moral high ground to continue to escalate this communist revolution. That's exactly what it is. And so I'm happy to see that rational conservatives have been slow to anger, right? I'm happy to see that, but we can't just have them create a narrative for us. Eventually something will have to be done. A firm boundary will have to be laid, or they'll just destroy everything in their path. That's their plan. That's their agenda.
One of the favorite tools of narcissistic people and abusers is they push you, like you're saying, and then the moment you do anything that maybe you're not even pushing back, but you just hold a line, then they play the victim. Oh, do you see how horrible Cheryl is? Do you see how she doesn't care about people because she won't wear a mask? I mean, it's like, they play the victim card like nobody's business. I think it's in soccer, I think, in real soccer, not football soccer, where if you have anything that even looks like there might be a penalty against you, you play it up so big, you fall down and hold your ankle.
It's a classic, malignant narcissistic tactic. We all know people like that, in our lives, and that's what's happening on the mass scale. It's really sort of now it's reached a form of mass hysteria. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. It's so irrational, and so many people who are involved in it don't even know or understand what they're involved in. It's really fascinating to watch from a psychological point of view, isn't it?
It is. And I mean, fascinating but terrifying, because it's not a TV show. It's happening in real time. It's playing out on our TVs. But and before we move on, because we've got so many things to talk about with you, with your training, but can you give like maybe one or two best tools other than just try not to react?
Knowledge is power. Mm-hmm. So if you can educate yourself, even if you just like take some of these terms that Cheryl and I are talking about, and you can just read about it or look up YouTube videos on different forms of narcissistic abuse on the micro level, like on the local level. You don't have to understand mass communication or propaganda or any of those things. Knowledge is power. So the more knowledge that you have, the more that you'll see through these tactics that are being used against you. And that will help you, really have a calm and clear mind. And that's what's important, because that way you can be proactive now, and you can make decisions that are not only best for you, for your loved ones, and for your family, or for your community, start there, but then for the world in general, because water seeks its own level. So the higher that you rise with your empowerment, the more that's going to influence those around you. Directly and indirectly,
Amen.
There is a place for justifiable anger, right? There is a place for that, as long as we don't let it run our life, right?
And lose our reason,
right?
We have to stay in our reasonable, rational minds, and use anger and indignation as a tool in our toolbox, but don't let it run the show, I think is
right. I mean, Jesus took a whip to the money changers in the temple.
He did indeed.
If you read those red letters, a lot of the things that Jesus had to say against people who were doing this exact same thing back then during the Roman rule, you're like, wow, did he really say that to them? You better believe that he did, right? He was not a pacifist, right? You remember the line from my speech that I think got your attention, right? In the Garden of Gethsemane, when the disciples are asking, after I'm gone, what should we do? And he gave this long list of things that he should do. And he said, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. His disciples had swords. They had a security detail. And he said that during the Roman Empire. when it was illegal for them to have swords. Because why? We don't follow the laws of man. We follow the laws of God.
Wow. Amen.
That's
Amen
awesome.
right there.
So, hey, Todd, tell us about IDS and how is the training different?
Oh, man. So IDS is so radically different. I wish we had like 3 days just to talk about it, right? It's like trying to describe a sphere to somebody that lives in a two-dimensional reality. Like we take a very different, holistic, interdisciplinary approach. We take all the multiple disciplines with, force multipliers, firearms, with combatives, right? With all the intermediate skills and, that happen before and after, use of force, psychology, understanding of violent crime and how it works, deterrence, detection, right? All of these things, and we bake them all into the cake. All of those things are learned together simultaneously in a holistic approach. And one of the big differences is that our training is built based on available data. We don't take an arbitrary approach. So I'm a certified in force science analyst, right? So I'm a data freak. So I want to take a look at the data and really want to know, how do violent critical incidents happen for citizen defenders? What does that look like in reality, separate from how it's been taught in the past, based on heavy influences from military and law enforcement, knowing that our interactions are very different from what theirs are, and our rules of engagement are very different. The context will create the strategy that we build training methodologies around that reflect exactly what you're going to experience in reality. And we do a lot of that with inert weapons and non-lethal training munitions, like CERT, simunitions, things like that. We do a lot of it so that we can do this with real resistance and reality, not just force-on-force training. There are other applications and more advanced training methodologies that we can use, but we also do it in a way where we have a frequency that allows for human beings to have real competence when it comes to situations like this. Not fake competence, not going to the range every now and then, a static range and shooting holes in paper, but real resistance where you're doing this like it's a martial arts model, where you're going to classes locally 2-3 times a week. So that allows you to have real competence, real true myelination, unconscious competence when it comes to dealing with an infinite number of variables that are not repeatable or predictable, right? So if we set ourselves up in a way where all we're doing is dealing with predictable variables, we're only setting ourselves up for failure, because that's not what happens in reality. And if you're not doing it, then all you have is education. You don't have training. You have an intellectual understanding for how you think these things happen, but in reality, it's not. So what happens is we're countering another psychological term known as the Dunning-Kruger Effect, where people of low ability suffer from a metacognitive inability to recognize their own ineptitude, meaning they think they're better at something than they actually are. Right? So what happens in the current model is that they're fanning the flames of the Dunning-Kruger effect, and they're fattening people for the kill, leading them to believe that they can do things that they can't actually do. I've seen it thousands of times with thousands of students. That's why I'm so certain. We now know, I have a deep background as a human performance coach. I know how this works at the scientific level. So now it's time for us to usher in this new training paradigm that is more closely reflective of reality. That's the most succinct version of how I say we're different that I have, without going on for too long.
No, that is amazing. And so when you use the word myelination, and that kind of goes back to that psychophysiological, right? That is when you're creating pathways in the brain, right? It's like muscle memory, for maybe lack of a better term, that you've connected things that maybe wouldn't normally be connected in such a way that they become automatic. Am I describing that well?
Yes. Yep. That's exactly right. So if we think about a neural pathway, right? In neuroscience, it's called an axon, right? Think of it as an axon as a wire in your brain, right? The more that you do something and practice something, and we utilize the principles for what's called neuroplasticity. That means that your brain is always changing. 70% of your neural connections are changing every hour. Another reason why we don't want to react to the left, because they're wiring your brain. That's what
they
want.
are.
Okay? Right? And more way, you don't even know how sophisticated this is. So let's just say that you have this wire, right, that creates a skill, right? That creates some type of a skill that you want to acquire. The more that you practice something correctly, on this axon or this wire, this neural pathway creates this thin opaque sheath over the top of it known as myelin sheath. And the more that you practice something, right, the thicker that sheath becomes. And eventually that sheath becomes thick enough where that pathway becomes so efficient that it becomes the primary pathway. And that's when we have a level of unconscious competence where we don't have to think about doing something anymore, right? We don't have to put a lot of conscious effort into it. We can actually do that successfully on a regular basis. So just to give the audience a simple metric for how this works, just to reach a level of unconscious competence with one single skill requires 20 minutes of practice a day for 12 consecutive weeks for one single skill. Now that 20 minutes a day needs to be maintained in order for that level of competence to be maintained, right? There's something that happens in the brain called synaptic pruning. That means that the brain decides what's most important for it. And whatever you're practicing a lot, the brain dedicates the neurological resources toward that skill. And so what happens is all the other skills that you had at a high level, it starts to take from those areas and apply it to these areas, right? And so if you're not practicing something a lot, those skills actually become perishable. So now we want to talk about you're carrying a lethal weapon when somebody else is trying to kill you or harm you in some way that maybe is less lethal. Now the only tool you have is a hammer, so everything looks like a nail. If you can't handle the whole use of force continuum, then you're just becoming a liability more than you're becoming an asset.
Wow, that is so fascinating. And how did you go from your previous world, your previous career, into psychology, or maybe you did psychology before, and then how did you end up teaching people life-saving skills? How did that happen?
Honestly, it was a calling. I had a very successful practice and lecture circuit on psychophysiology, and I just started to see what was happening in the world. And to be completely transparent, the Lord just put it on my heart and said, "No, I've got a new direction for you. I want you to apply the knowledge and the skill that I've given you and the gifts that I've given you for something different." And that took a lot of white knuckle prayer, right? I'm like, I was doing it. I was teaching these things part-time, right, at the time. But I'm like, now I'm going to give up all of this to do this. Yeah. And so once I did it and I got the blessing from my wife, I went in head first. And now here we are. Now IDS has we have our own instructor certification program. Wow. We have seven different levels of certification, and we have 40 affiliates all across North America now.
That's fantastic. So you used a phrase in all of that, citizen defender, and you're careful with your words. You use them very purposefully. What distinguishes a citizen defender from any other person?
A citizen defender has it in their DNA to watch over the flock. It's why they're here. It's why they were born. It's what they're here to do. And they know it. It's just that society wants to tell them that they're bad. Society wants to tell them that they're evil, because they're comfortable with violence. Well, the only way that you can really understand violence is to be comfortable with it. And almost everybody that I know that is not a psychopath, sociopath, or malignant narcissist, everybody else who's comfortable with violence hates it.
Yeah.
But they understand that they have to be comfortable with that uncomfortable place in order to adequately protect the flock. And so the analogy that I like to say is, you know, the sheep are afraid of the sheepdog because they saw his teeth when he fought the wolf.
That's perfect.
The sheepdog doesn't want to fight the wolf. But trust me, the wolf doesn't want to fight the sheepdog even more.
That's the truth. And the sheep are grateful, whether they know it or not, for that sheepdog being there. Nowadays, the sheep throw ugly words at the sheepdog, but you know, that's okay. Citizen defenders have tough skin because, again, like you said, it's part of their DNA.
Yeah, and then just to add to that definition, you know, we like to say that citizen defenders they're highly trained in multiple disciplines, especially the discipline of conflict avoidance, right? Situational awareness, early detection, early departure, right? And then and unfortunately it does come time to defend, then we do that with a level of measure and skill.
You hear stories all the time where people have, you know, they've actually caused something to happen more because they just didn't walk away from it. They just, you know, learning to walk away from a problem when you can safely do it is so valuable.
Yeah, I think we live in a culture that has sort of created this, what's the word I'm looking for? This presupposition that a fight is symmetrical, that it's a duel, right? Someone challenges you, like it's the duel at high noon, right? And even in a lot of, one of my big criticisms of the firearms training world is they treat it like it's this duel at high noon and who's the fastest gun in the West, right? You want to be fast, practice a lot. One, you want to be fast, make fast and accurate decisions. That requires proper training for you to make a fast and accurate decision. But you should also know that the majority of conflicts that happen are not symmetrical. They are asymmetrical. There's a difference between a fight and an attack. And the majority of time, you will be attacked. I always tell my students, if you're ever in a fight, don't ever come back here. We hold classes here all week long at our training center. If you're in a fight, don't come back here. You don't belong here. You didn't walk away. You didn't de-escalate. If you're attacked, that's something different. You should also know that 80% of those attacks are simple assaults. They're not aggravated assaults. So you're not justified to use your firearm. But now you're carrying a firearm. And the person who is imposing that simple assault onto you sees or feels that you have a firearm. Do you know how to handle that? And what distance are those simple assaults taking place at? They're taking place at contact distance. The other 20% of those assaults are aggravated assaults, and the majority of those aggravated assaults are not gun on gun. They are multiple attackers, 56.6% of the time. They are impact weapons and they are edged weapons. They're not gunfights. The majority of critical incidents that happen for citizen defenders, there's a very small sliver in that pie where you're either justified to use a firearm or the firearm is the best option tactically. Very rarely is that the first choice. Very, very rarely. Or is it the best choice? And the majority of the time, you better know how to fight your way to this and retain it at the same time.
That is so...
And I guarantee you, and people have no idea how fast it happens.
Oh, it's half a second, you know?
Well, and that is so important, especially right now at this time in history when we have millions upon millions of brand new first-time gun owners, and they are trying to figure out, well, okay, I know I need training. We've sold at AZ Firearms, we've sold to multitudes of brand new firearms owners, and every one of them is eager to get training. That's a huge blessing right of its own. They understand that they're unfamiliar, they need training. But what training? You know, and who is a good trainer? And what is effective training? And all of this that you're talking about, it will help people understand that.
Cheryl, I'm going to interrupt you.
Sure.
Okay. The You know how much I love the Second Amendment and how much I
Yes.
love freedom, and that I am on the side of this industry and I am on the side of the training industry. I care about it so much that I'm willing to criticize it.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm
That's
willing
important.
to be I'm willing to be the heel. The current paradigm and the current model in firearms training is woefully outdated. It is a self-perpetuating paradigm that is woefully outdated to perpetuate itself. It doesn't want to embrace what is best. It wants to embrace what's best for it.
And familiar.
That has to stop in the name of the preservation of life.
Well, Todd, what about
has to stop?
What about a new gun owner that the first time, they didn't like guns before, they decide they like guns now? Isn't taking a basic class at least put him in the right direction to decide how far they want to go?
No, it's not.
Strong words.
Yes.
Strong words.
It's not.
Explain.
It's not. Well, tell me what does a basic class look like at a static range? Standing still, flat-footed, focusing on marksmanship. Do you think that marksmanship is the highest priority? No, marksmanship is not the highest priority. You know what I'm saying? Shooting is a priority, but it's not the highest priority, right? And what firearms instructors, here's what firearms instructors are. They're presenters. They're not coaches.
Okay.
And you know what?
Somewhere though. We have to start. I mean, a person, could you expect that a person that's brand new in the field go directly to a class like yours immediately?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Because then they understand the nature of violence.
Right. And I agree with that. I think the best you can take is what you need to take. But there are.
I guarantee you that if you came and took my class, you would see things very differently. You say everybody has to train this way right away.
Well, you have to understand.
You would say every CCW class needs to look like this.
Right.
That's what you would say.
Well, I agree with
you. Don't know. I love you, but you don't know because you've never experienced it.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
Like you said,
you've never experienced it.
Describe a sphere to somebody
who lives in a two-dimensional reality, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I know the circle. I know the circle. The circle's good." I'm like, but I'm talking about a sphere. They're like, "Yes, the circle is great." I'm like, but I'm talking about a sphere. I'm not talking about a triangle or a square. I'm talking about cubes and pyramids and spheres. I'm talking about dimensions that you don't know even exists.
Yeah.
And that's what the reality of violence looks like. The reality of violence is not linear. So you're setting people up for catastrophic failure.
I mean,
I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I have to bust apart this paradigm so that we can grow and evolve.
Right.
Not at all. I mean, I
don't take any offense from it.
I see you as it's that important. We are talking about life and death. We're talking about every time somebody does, out of ignorance or lack of training or bad training, misuse,
or going to prison for 30 years or not.
Oh my gosh, right? And every time people can point to an example of the wrong usage of a firearm, it hurts our industry, it hurts our rights, it hurts those of us that are trying to do advocacy.
Listen, I train police. It is. I train police officers. I love police officers. I do a lot of volunteering to help police officers, right? But I'm also enemy number one because I'm not on the side of law enforcement. I'm on the side of the truth. And the truth is there's been a horrible problem in law enforcement with inadequate training.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt about it. And how can, it takes a lot to get
because they don't understand the whole, they don't understand the whole spectrum. They don't know what to do. So they panic, or they go to higher force because they don't understand the stages between 0 and 100. They've got 0 and they've got 100. And that's it.
Higher force is not the answer. Higher force is not the answer.
Well,
it can be, and it's a great, and it can be, and it's a great deterrent all by itself. It is. But make no mistake, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Right, but you don't go from 0.
But I say, don't be a gunfighter, be a fighter with a gun.
Right.
Nice. So on that point, what are the contextual, or are there contextual differences between training for law enforcement or military and citizen defenders?
They're so numerous that I don't even know where to begin. Again, the current paradigm is built on the presumption and the heavy influences from law enforcement and military. Let me ask you, infantry, right? In the military, what distances do those engagements take place on average? 250 to 300 yards. 250 to 300 yards.
Okay.
Okay. Are they wearing body armor? Do they have
Yeah.
sophisticated communications and support?
Mm-hmm.
Are they on a team?
Mm-hmm.
Are they carrying a carbine? Is there an automatic presumption of compliance?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have air support? Do they have more ammunition on the way? Do they have their grandmother with them at the dinner table? Do they have their 5-year-old and their daughter and their wife who doesn't know anything about self-defense? Is military trained to close and kill? Yes. What about law enforcement? What's their training? Very similar, but they're not trained to close and kill. They're trained to close and detain. They're trained to engage. For citizen defenders, our role is to disengage as quickly as possible and defend when it's appropriate, and then become a good witness. You're comparing apples and oranges. You're comparing two different things. And everyone has this assumption that they think that they know what engagements look like for citizen defenders, but they don't happen the same way. Also, law enforcement military happens in the dark. It happens at night, a lot of it does, but it doesn't happen that way for citizen defenders. But what are the most popular classes? Low light, no light classes, because it's cool and it's tactical and it's fun. But they don't happen in the dark. They happen during hours of darkness. They happen in well-illuminated transitional spaces during hours of darkness. And the majority of them happen at contact distance. When and how you least expect it. And if you don't have trained and myelinated reflexes, you can be in big trouble. Do it right. I could go on and on and on and on and on. I don't have a union rep. I don't get paid leave.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Your goals
I could go.
are different.
They're not the same. I'm not carrying a carbine with me.
Yeah.
You know,
and it's definitely not like the movies, right? The movies where your firearm never runs out of ammo. And, you know, if you do have to use your firearm or whatever tool of defense you have in a deadly manner to save life, you don't get to just walk off into the sunset. You know,
our rules of engagement are different. Our rules of engagement are different. How we manipulate our weapon is different. What's happening in our environment is different. Where our muzzle should be. Like, for example, I train law enforcement, so I ask them all the time, on an average week, how many times do you think that you actually, draw down on somebody? Like, gosh, I don't even know, so many times. Yeah, but I can't do that. I can't point my firearm at somebody because I'll be charged with an aggravated assault. I don't have a reasonable presumption of compliance. You do. The decision making is drastically different. Drastically. Right. I'm not, I can't even tell you. Like, we'll have people come to a 4.5-day course and go, oh my gosh, like I had no idea. These are highly trained people. And they'll say, yeah, I wish I had 4.5 years with you.
Yeah.
You had 4.5 days. You didn't even scratch the surface.
Yeah. I've got to figure out a way and a time to get me to one of your classes for sure. And
hey, Carrie Sloan's going to be at our Citizen Defender Boot Camp in September. So
awesome. Yes, she was one of our speakers in DC as well.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And, training the people who advocate and speak at the national level, that is so important because everything we learn works its way into the way that we speak and engage other people. So that's awesome. I even have more questions that I can't get to because we've run ourselves out of time.
That's okay. That's
But
okay.
you know what? That means I have to ask you back, and hopefully that means you'll say yes.
Of course, anytime. I'd be happy to be back. Thank you so much to both of you for having me on, and don't take anything that I say as gospel. There's only one gospel, right? Do your own due diligence, but my big message is think for yourself.
I love
Think
it.
for yourself. Let the evidence, let the data, let the empiricism lead you to your decisions. Don't take anybody's word for anything.
I agree, Todd. Hey, so how do people get a hold of you?
Yes, thank you for asking. So our website for our business is www.thisidids.com. But really the hub of our business is Facebook. We're always putting out educational videos and materials on Facebook. So Integrative Defense Strategies on Facebook, Integrative Defense Strategies on YouTube as well. You can also follow me. I'm a regular contributor on Funker Tactical, so you can see my playlist on Funker Tactical. And I'm a regular contributor on PDN and the Personal Defense Network, as well as Aperture Fight Focus Network as well. So you can check out some of my work there. I'd be honored. And if anybody is interested in learning more about becoming an instructor in this new paradigm, in this new model, reach out to me. Go to our website and just click on affiliates, and you can see a way that you can fill out an intake form to take the next step toward becoming an IDS instructor and affiliate.
I love it. And that was Funker, right? With an N.
Yes, Funker. Funker. Funker Tactical. Yes.
I love it.
Thanks for clearing that up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for spending this much time with us and for your passion, because I mean, you can tell that it matters, and it matters to you, and that is going to really impact your students in a way that wouldn't otherwise be the case. So I love it.
Thanks, Cheryl. I appreciate both of you. You guys be well and stay safe. I look forward to seeing you over at your shop one day.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye
Thanks,
now.
guys. Bye-bye. Thanks.
That was awesome.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
A lot of passion.
A lot of passion. And he can back up everything that he said, which is so refreshing nowadays, because we're in that, that gaslighting world that we were talking about earlier, where people just say anything and then they just keep repeating it, and it's not based in anything.
Right.
So.
And there's so many instructors out there that are just doing it for them. All they care about is what they want to tell you, what they know. And so, it's good. And there are so many tiers to owning a firearm.
Mm-hmm.
And not just owning a firearm, but being a responsible citizen, protecting your family, whether you use a firearm or your hands or whatever. There are so many tiers to it. And these things take 1 second to change your life. In 1 second, you can change your life from everything is great to a total disaster. It's just like driving a car 80 miles an hour down the highway. Mm-hmm. All it takes is one little thing. If you have a blowout, what do? You train yourself to all these things, right? Mm-hmm. So, I will encourage anybody that owns a firearm, anybody that wants to be responsible for their family safety, to look into classes, look into something.
And I really want to take an IDS class really bad.
I'm intimidated. I'm tired already. Yes.
Yeah. I'm scared. I'm intimidated, but I know he's going to be an amazing teacher. So
yes, he will
do it.
The passion's there. You can tell.
I'm going to do it. And I'll report back. I'll let you know how
maybe I'll take your luggage.
Blown.
Maybe I'll carry your luggage for you like I do at DC Project.
Yeah. Well, you can do that. No, we should do it together, because then we are a force multiplier, right? Everywhere we go, you're my security, I'm your security.
Okay. All right. Hey, it's time to thank our guests.
It is. Absolutely. Our amazing listeners, thank you so much for spending time with us, whether you are on the OpsLens app. That's a place that our show appears, and the app implies your smartphone, right? They do have a website, but really the app is the thing. Did you just yawn while I was talking?
Well, I'm used to it.
just yawned while I was talking,
Yes.
but it's okay. I'll get over it. I will de-escalate. See, I've already learned something from Todd. So yes, OpsLens app, please download that. It's a free app, and there's tons of great shows and building all the time. Whether you're watching us on YouTube, watching us on GunStreamer, or listening to us as the audio only on our website, where you go GunFreedomRadio.com, click the On Demand tab, and binge listen to your heart's content. Click the guest tab. You can see photos and bios.
And we have every guest that we've had on the show. You can click on them and get a link to them. And
every single one. It's a great networking tool, really,
right.
to see who in the industry is an expert in what area. And I don't hate it when you spend time there. I really don't. It's it's time well spent, if I do say so myself. And also thank you to our amazing guest, Todd Fossey of Integrative Defense Strategies in Minnesota, and for all the work that he does. And until next time, what are we supposed to be doing, Dan?
Pray for this country. Pray for this world.
Oh, please. Yes. It needs it, right? And when we pray for others, it's good for us too. So
yes, pray for our
win-win.
Leaders,
absolutely,
our royal leaders as well.
Even the ones I don't like.
How about even the ones you didn't vote for?
Yeah, even the ones, maybe especially the ones you didn't vote for, especially the ones you don't like, right?
Okay.
Be good to each other. Have a great week, and God bless.
Bye-bye.